There are moments in music history that feel less like performances and more like sacred echoes of the soul. In June 1977, in Rapid City, South Dakota, Elvis Presley physically weakened, but spiritually unshaken sat at a piano before thousands. What followed was not just a song, but a raw confession, a farewell disguised as music. His rendition of Unchained melody that night would etch itself forever in the hearts of those who heard it. This wasn't just Elvis the performer, it was Elvis the man, pouring out his last reserves of strength into one final glory. Elvis Presley in 1977 was a man under siege by his health, by his fame, and by the expectations of the world. Decades of being the king of rock and roll had carved a path both glorious and tragic. His body, once the very image of youth and rebellion, now showed the cost of years on the road, prescription medication, and relentless pressure. Fans who had worshipped the icon were now whispering about his decline, tabloids circling like vultures. Yet despite the fatigue, despite the toll, Elvis continued to tour. Music was not just a profession, it was his lifeline. That summer, his tour schedule carried him into the Midwest, where he would perform in Rapid City, South Dakota. To many, it was just another stop. To history, it became a moment of transcendence. Those close to him knew Elvis was struggling. His doctors worried, his entourage was anxious, and even his fans could sense it. Still, he stepped on stage. Still, he gave everything. What no one expected was that in his exhaustion, he would deliver one of the purest performances of his career. Unchained Melody, a song of longing, devotion, and love unbroken, became his vessel. He sat down at the piano, hands trembling, yet determined, and for the next few minutes, the king of rock and roll ceased to be a fading superstar. He became, instead, a man singing directly from his soul. June 21st, 1977. The Rushmore Plaza Civic Center in Rapid City filled with over 10,000 people, their voices buzzing with anticipation. For most, attending an Elvis concert was more than entertainment. It was a pilgrimage. Generations who had grown up with him on the radio, who had watched him on the silver screen, now sat shoulder to shoulder, clutching tickets that felt like pieces of history. Yet behind the curtain, there was tension. Elvis was tired. His health was fragile, his appearance no longer the slim icon of the 1950s, but a man carrying years of weight, physically and emotionally. His band, loyal and protective, worried whether he could last through the setlist. Still, the moment his name was announced, the hall erupted. He stepped onto the stage, white jumpsuit glittering under the lights, and for a moment, just a moment, the king was back. The roar of the crowd seemed to lift him, if only temporarily, out of his struggles. The show began as expected. Hits like C.C. Rider, I Got a Woman, and Love Me. Fans screamed, cried, and clapped in rhythm. But those in the front rows noticed something different in his eyes. There was determination, yes, but also fragility. Elvis wasn't just performing, he was fighting. Fighting his body, fighting time, fighting to hold on to the magic that had defined him. Midway through the concert, he announced he wanted to perform something special. The atmosphere shifted. A piano was rolled to the front of the stage, its glossy surface catching the spotlight. Murmurs spread across the audience. Elvis at the piano was rare, intimate, and always powerful. He adjusted the microphone, sat down, and placed his fingers on the keys. The arena hushed, as if thousands of hearts knew instinctively that something extraordinary was about to happen. Then came the opening notes of Unchained Melody. The audience gasped. Many fans knew the song from its haunting lyrics and soaring melody. To hear Elvis fragile, vulnerable, yet unyielding take it on live, in this state, felt almost unthinkable. His voice began soft, trembling, but as the song built, so did his strength. Every word carried weight. Every note climbed higher than anyone expected he could still reach. For those present, time seemed to stop. It wasn't just music. It was testimony. A man nearing the end of his journey, offering up the last of his soul to the people who had carried him for so long. The contrast between his weakened body and his indomitable voice made the performance unforgettable. By the final note, the crowd was on its feet, many in tears, witnessing what would later be called one of Elvis Presley's greatest moments on stage. That night in Rapid City, Elvis reminded the world of who he truly was not. Just a star, not just an icon, but an artist willing to give everything until nothing was left. Unchained Melody was not written for Elvis Presley. In fact, the song had already lived many lives before it ever reached his hands. Composed in 1955 by Alex North and Hy Zarrett, it was originally part of a prison film called Unchained. Through the years, countless artists covered it, but each version carried the same haunting message, an aching plea for love to remain, for connection to endure beyond time and circumstance. For Elvis in 1977, this song was more than a ballad. It was a mirror. Every lyric reflected something deeply personal. Oh, my love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch a long, lonely time. Lines that resonated with his isolation, his yearning, his fragile grip on the life he once commanded with ease. He had been adored by millions, yet often felt profoundly alone. He had conquered stages worldwide, yet wrestled with demons in silence. In Unchained Melody, he found a vessel that allowed him to confess without explanation. It is no accident that Elvis chose to play the piano himself during this performance. He could have let his band carry him, could have simply stood with a microphone, but no, he sat at the keys. It was a deliberate act of intimacy. The piano forced him into vulnerability. His trembling hands, his faltering yet determined touch on the keys, made the song feel raw and unfiltered. Unlike the rehearsed perfection of earlier years, this was Elvis stripped down, singing as if he were alone in a room, speaking directly to those who loved him. What made the performance unforgettable wasn't only the power of his voice, it was the clash between frailty and strength. He struggled physically, yet when he sang, it was as though his spirit transcended. His broken body, the high notes soared with defiance, as if to prove that while his body was weakening, his soul was unchained. The audience may not have realized it at the time, but Elvis was giving them a farewell gift. He had only a few months left to live, and though no one could predict the exact moment, the sense of finality hovered in the air. His choice of Unchained Melody was no coincidence. It was destiny. A song about longing, eternity, and undying. Devotion became the perfect anthem for a man whose legacy would outlive his mortal years. For Elvis, this wasn't just a performance. It was a prayer that his music, his love, and his presence would remain with the world even after he was gone. When he hit that final, almost impossibly high note, he didn't just reach it, he shattered the chains of doubt about who he truly was. Even in decline, he was still the king. Unchained Melody had been sung before, and it would be sung again by others. But on that night in Rapid City, the song belonged to Elvis alone, and it will forever remain his. When Elvis struck the last thunderous chord on the piano and let his voice hang in the rafters of the Rapid City Arena, there was silence. For a breathless moment, thousands of people stood suspended between disbelief and awe. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted into a roar that shook the walls. It was not just applause. It was gratitude, relief, and heartbreak rolled into one. Fans in the front rows were openly weeping. Some held their hands to their mouths, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Many had seen Elvis dozens of times, but this was different. This wasn't the dazzling showman swiveling his hips or joking between songs. This was Elvis Presley, the man, bearing his soul in a way he rarely allowed. The spectacle felt less like a concert and more like a confession, a final message to those who had walked the journey with him. Backstage, members of the band and the Memphis Mafia exchanged looks of astonishment. They had worried about his health, worried whether he would even make it through the show. And yet, Elvis had pulled from somewhere deep inside him a performance that would eclipse everything else that night. His body might have been weak, but his spirit had flared with one last burst of brilliance. For the people in Rapid City, the memory was instant legend. They spoke of it with trembling voices, knowing they had been part of something historic. None of them could have known then that Elvis had only 56 days left to live. But the feeling in the air was undeniable. This had been more than music. It had been a farewell disguised as a ballad. In the years that followed, the recording of Unchained melody from that night would circulate among fans, bootlegged at first, then officially released. Each time it resurfaced, new generations discovered it not as polished studio Elvis, not as the youthful rebel, but as a man at the edge of mortality, still reaching for eternity with his voice. It was raw. It was imperfect. And that imperfection made it immortal. Historians and critics often point to that night as proof of the duality of Elvis Presley, a man crushed by fame and frailty, yet still capable of transcendent artistry. To his fans, though, it was simpler. It was love. Elvis had given them everything he had left, pouring out what remained of his strength in a final act of devotion. When people look back at his final year, many remember the tabloids, the decline, the tragedy. But those who know, those who listen to that trembling, soaring performance, understand that his legacy cannot be defined by weakness. That night in Rapid City, he reclaimed the crown not with spectacle, but with sincerity. It was not the image of the king that triumphed, but the heart of the man. And in that moment, Elvis Presley secured his place not only in music history, but in eternity. After Rapid City, Elvis Presley's tour rolled on, but those closest to him sensed that the end was near. His schedule remained relentless, his health fragile. He returned to Graceland between shows, retreating into the sanctuary of the mansion. He loved, but the sparkle that had once carried him seemed dimmer with each passing week. Yet, in spite of the decline, he continued to perform. It was as if the stage was the last thread holding him to the world. Just weeks later, on August 16, 1977, Elvis was gone. The news spread like wildfire across the globe. The king of rock and roll was dead at just 42 years old. Fans poured into the streets of Memphis, weeping outside the gates of Graceland, radios replaying his hits like hymns of mourning. The man who had redefined popular music, who had brought joy to millions, was suddenly silent. But in that silence, one sound remained, his voice at the piano in Rapid City. For many, Unchained melody became his unspoken farewell. Unlike his earlier triumphs, the screaming crowds of the 1950s, the Hollywood glamour, or the Vegas residences, this was not about image. It was about truth. A tired man, near the end, summoning everything he had left to sing words that seemed prophetic. And time goes by so slowly, and time can do so much. To his fans, it felt as though Elvis had been singing directly to them, offering a final gift before stepping off life's stage. The song itself carried symbolic weight. It spoke of longing, of waiting, of an eternal love that would never fade. In hindsight, it echoed the bond between Elvis and his audience, a love that death could not break. His performance, shaky yet powerful, became a testament to resilience. Even when his body betrayed him, his voice carried the flame. Decades later, the clip of Elvis at that piano remains one of the most watched and most cherished moments of his career. Younger generations, who never saw him live. Discover it on screens and feel the same chills that shook the arena in 1977. They see not just a superstar, but a man flawed, human, and deeply devoted to his art. When people ask why Elvis Presley is still called the King, the answer isn't found only in his early hits or his groundbreaking style. It lies in moments like Rapid City. Because royalty isn't just about crowns and triumphs. It's about grace under suffering, about giving everything even when there's almost nothing left to give. And that is exactly what Elvis did. In the end, Unchained melody was more than a song. It was a curtain call, a last whisper to the world. And though Elvis left the stage of life far too soon, his voice remains unchained, echoing forever, reminding us that greatness isn't measured in perfection, but in the courage to sing your truth, even at the edge of goodbye. Elvis Presley's Unchained melody in Rapid City was not just music, it was immortality caught in a single performance. His body may have left us in 1977, but his voice remains unchained, eternal, and forever loved. Did this moment of Elvis at the piano move you too? Share your thoughts below, because his legacy lives on every time we remember.